Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Legionaries of Christ, and I teach theology. This is a podcast on the StarQuest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today, we're on day 349. We are covering Gaudium et Spes 73 on political community now has a keener sense of human dignity. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican and frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday, we spoke about how Christianity needs to show when we work in the economy. We need to show that we're Christians. Today, we start a new chapter. That's chapter 4, the life of the political community. And the summary is that people are now more aware of rights based on human dignity, and these rights should be extended to all. Paragraph 73 has 5 subparagraphs, which we'll read in 3 parts. A and B talk about how modern societies become more aware of rights based on human dignity. C talks how we recognize rights for all citizens, such as minorities. D and E talk about we need just political structure, not kleptocracy. Kleptocracy is the rule by thieves, the ones who are thieving at the top. So, anyways, let's get straight into 73 A and B. A, in our day, profound changes are apparent also in the structure and institutions of peoples. These result from their cultural, economic, and social evolution. Such changes have a great influence on the life of the political community, especially regarding the rights and duties of all. In the exercise of civil freedom and in the attainment of the common good, and in organizing the relations of citizens among themselves and with respect to public authority. B. The present keener sense of human dignity has given rise in many parts of the world to attempts to bring about a political juridical order, which will give better protection to the rights of the persons in public life. These include the right to freely meet and to form associations, the right to express one's own opinion, and to profess one's own religion both publicly and privately. The protection of these rights of a person is indeed a necessary condition so that citizens, individually and collectively, can take an active part in the life and government of the state. What we can see looking back is the about 20 years between the end of World War II and when this document was written and approved was really a time of a lot of transition. A lot of the current social political order was founded, public social political order, not the church, but the kind of out there in the world, was really established and founded at this time frame. You had the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the founding of the United Nations, the founding of NATO, the founding at the time of the Warsaw Pact, which was considered much bigger of a threat than it ended up being. And we have movements in in individual countries. You have civil rights movements in the U.S. for people of different races. You have the start of the disability rights movement in the U.S. Things like that are happening in the 60s here, or between 1945 and 1965. This is really a great transition, a great setup for the economics and political system of today. Even, for example, the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency is really established in this time too. So people become aware of things when this is kind of out in the public more like this. And how do we understand this? We all understand this as Catholics, as Christians, all going back to our human dignity based on being in the image and likeness of God. And this subparagraph gives a few examples of these rights. Freedom of association, we can associate with who we want. Free speech, we can say what we want, we can publish what we want. Freedom of the press there as well, related to free speech. Mentions freedom of religion and practicing religion publicly, not just privately. Finally, it notes we should have more participation in government, not just one person or one family or one set of nobles or something. Moving on to 73C, it talks about how we recognize rights for all citizens and notes the special importance of doing so for minorities. C, along with cultural, economic, and social development, there's a growing desire among many people to play a greater part in organizing the life of the political community. In the conscience of many arises an increasing concern that the rights of minorities be recognized without any neglect for their duties towards the political community. In addition, there is steadily growing respect for men of other opinions or other religions. At the same time, there is wider cooperation to guarantee the actual exercise of personal rights to all citizens, not only to a few privileged individuals. This time, the 1960s and such, had this desire for all to take part in the political community. And I think we still have this desire today to look at these countries where, where we see like one family or one kind of ruler is take everything and ruling all on their own. This idea that, hey, we should bring democracy, hey, we should help these people have a wider spectrum. Now, it's not saying that democracy is always the perfect system. The kind of U.S. foreign policy of implementing democracy in every single country is not necessarily the best option. But this idea that we have more partaking in, not just kind of, kings or a certain kind of family ruling or things like that. And here it notes the special importance of rights for minorities, because these are the people who are less likely to have rights in a society. Societies, traditionally, historically, have tended to be the majority oppressing the minority. And so it's important that we recognize the rights of these minorities. It also notes these people have duties too, right? So you get rights as, an African American or whatever. At the time, they're getting more rights, but they also have duties to contribute to society, to vote, to make money and contribute to the tax refund, all the other things. And in this minority aspect, we also have the respect for minority religions. So the right to different people having the different religions. And finally, this subparagraph notes that all should have rights. We need to have them for all. They're not just something for a certain party, certain group. They're for all. Moving on to our last two subparagraphs today, D and E talk about how we need just political structure, not kleptocracy. Let's read them. 73D. However, those political systems prevailing in some parts of the world are to be reproved, which hamper civic and religious freedom, victimize large numbers through avarice and political crimes, and divert the exercise of authority from the service of the common good to the interests of one or another faction of the rulers themselves. E. There is no better way to establish political life on a truly human basis than by fostering an inward sense of justice and kindness and of service to the common good, and by strengthening basic convictions as to the true nature of the political community and the right exercise and sphere of action of public authority. These subparagraphs set us against certain kinds of political systems. Now, contextually, I think it's very clear that they are implying a lot of the communist systems here. They don't state it, but there's kind of implied the kind of things they talk about. And they mention a number of types of injustice governments can do. Governments can restrict freedom, not allow people to have, rights and religious freedom, things like that. Governments can victimize people through avarice, through the greed there, and political crimes. That's kind of the kleptocracy. They can focus on just serving their own goods, their own little, family or small groups goods, rather than the true goods of the whole society, the common good. And those are really some important forms of injustice. And that's important to note, because you look at, for example, we look at a lot of the governments we think of most unjust today, and they're doing a lot of these things still today. Take, for example, somewhere like North Korea. You still see a lot of this today. And I think we also need to be aware that this can happen even in governments even in places where the government is generally just. I don't think the U.S. government is generally unjust, but I do sometimes have concerns where the focus is on enriching the few, not helping the many. And this kind of, using the government to just make certain individuals, certain small cohort of companies or individuals richer and richer. Finally, 73D talks about fostering just government. For a just government, we need both strengthening institutions and strengthening people. Because if you don't have, if you just have institutions, people who are unjust can take advantage of those institutions. If you just have good people, the institutions cannot survive if there's someone bad who comes in. So it is that kind of combination of just people and just institutions. And there's no specific set of rules exactly what the perfect idea of a just government is. The thing is, a lot of those depend on prudence and particulars. And, for example, whether you have a separately elected prime minister, separately elected president like the United States, or you have a prime minister who is just the leader of the party with most seats in the House, like in Canada or the UK. I don't think that there's a clear, one's more just than the other there. I think those countries have traditions and neither one's directly unjust. So thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you can donate to help StarCrest Boost It, another great podcast at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time monthly or join the StarCrest Patreon. Tomorrow we'll continue with the next paragraph of Gaudium Spes, paragraph 74 on families make up the political community. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information on the podcast, like playlists for individual documents and a replay, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X.